Hi, this is Tom Needham, and you're listening to The Sounds of Film, and I am so excited to have on the phone with us now a true legend, an American avant-garde artist, composer, musician, and film director. I'm talking about the great Laurie Anderson. In 1986, she released the concert film Home of the Brave. Her latest film, though, is Heart of a Dog, and it's out on Criterion, Blu-ray, and DVD. Laurie, thank you so much for joining us here on The Sounds of Film.
Thanks, here we are.
Laurie, I have to tell you, I loved this movie.
Thank you.
It's one of my favorites, and in particular, I love the way that you use animation, photography, music, film graphics, text, voice, all together in your own unique way. And it seems like the perfect culmination of everything that you've been doing throughout your career. I was wondering, I know you started off as a violinist and a sculptor, and it's happened over a period of time, but how did you first start to come up with the idea of mixing all these different types of art forms into the thing that you call your work?
Well, I never really made the distinction between how a story is told, whether you hear it or you paint it or you kind of just say it, or that's what they have in common is that these are different ways of telling stories. And so when I find a medium that lets you do it in like counterpoint, like tell one story with music and it's simultaneously with words, and then have images chime in with their kind of visual rhythms, it's just an expanded way of telling a story. So for me, for example, I've been doing a lot of VR lately, and that is like a dream come true for me. That is really an amazing medium because mostly because it's about disembodiment, and that you can, for example, scan a space, and then you can put the goggles on and watch the space utterly dissolve. Mm. You can look down at the chair that you feel you're in, that your hands tell you that you're in, that you're and yet you have no body. Oh, wow. This is a thrill, I've just, because a lot of people think, already know this really well. If somebody takes your picture, let's say, and you're photographing it, and you're picking your nose or you're squinting or something, and you're going, no, that's not me. That is not me. You've not captured me. I'm the one who's looking, not the one you're looking at. Mm. And that's who I think we really feel we are. We're not pictures. We're sort of seeing entities, or whatever, seeing machines or seeing things, So that is what VR is really, really good at. I mean, of course, you disappear sometimes in the movies too.
Yeah.
I guess I do too. I mean, or if you get lost in music, you can disappear too. And I guess that's been, like I said, the goal of everything I've ever made is to disappear.
So it sounds like you're saying that virtual reality is really going to be the next thing that really just transforms everything.
I don't know, because I hope in a way that home systems don't replace social experiences like movie theaters. I really hope that people don't just get lost in video games, which is mostly what they're used for now.
Yeah.
So it's and nothing against that. I love that, except that I'm not really into improving my shooting skills.
Right. Well, talking about the movie-going experience, in 1986, you put out a fantastic concert movie called Home of the Brave, and it was something that, a number of artists were doing, like the Talking Heads had stopped making sense. But that film was really quite amazing, and I was wondering, when you look back, that was a while ago. What was it from that experience that you learned that has kind of stuck with you, that you're still, taking stuff that you learned from that experience and employing it to your new work?
I learned never to make a concert film.
Why is that?
Well, it's too confusing, and if you noticed, I never did make another concert film.
I was wondering about that.
I would document films, concerts and performances, but that's different than making a film that you expect people to sit down and watch it. And for me, the reason I feel that way, or my motivation is, it's two audiences. Mm. one audience watching the other audience, and that just doesn't work, very well.
Why do you think that is?
It's too voyeuristic. You want to have a primary experience, not watch other people having experiences.
Yeah.
So I find it a little bit alienated. It doesn't. It's harder to fall into. You're watching other people like, why are they reacting like that?
Right.
It influences your own. It doesn't give you the privacy that I think is so great.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, another thing that you did around that time period is that you did 2 film scores for Spalding Gray's movie, Swimming to Cambodia,
yeah,
and Monster in a Box. And
right.
I love both of those movies. And,
me too.
Like you, he was a great storyteller. And, there really hasn't been anything exactly like the kind of work that he was doing, at least in film. And I was wondering, what you learned from working with Spalding, as well as the process of making those movies.
I didn't work with Spalding himself. I just looked at the film and wrote music, and of course it was an enormous amount of fun because in a situation like that with a guy and a glass of water and a table and a monologue, the composer has a huge amount of influence on what the meaning of that story is. If you obviously, music gives you emotional cues about how to feel about let's say there's a picture of a house, and if it's dum da da dum dum da da da, it's going to be wow, what cheery or overly cheery family is living in that house? Or obviously, ominous stuff it can change this exact same image into something deeply frightening.
Yeah.
So I got the chance to just look at a man with a glass of water and give different overtones to the stories. That was a big responsibility.
Yeah.
There's really nothing else to take in those shots. It's just that, But so I really made this film though as a kind of fluke. It wasn't I didn't set out to make a movie, and often I'm a little bit lazy in that way. I often use invitations as pretext to do some things that I want to do, but I don't necessarily. The idea of going out and rustling up money to make a film,
right?
One of the worst ideas ever. I just couldn't get myself to do that.
Yeah.
Even though now I would love to make another film, I think what stops me is I don't want to go out and raise money.
Well,
I know how hard that is, and it's super lazy to act like that. It's like, don't you have the commitment of your work? And I guess I kind of don't in certain ways because I just like keep working, and if it's just with a pencil, I don't mind. I don't think like the bigger the tools, the better the work. Obviously, that's kind of insane. I mean, I don't think. Well, I think some people do think that actually. Now that I'm saying it, that the more blockbuster the movie is, the more special effects. The chance it is of having people see it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Heart of a Dog a little bit. When I saw this movie, I was anticipating that, there was going to be a lot of really interesting information about you and your relationship with your dog, Lola Bell. But this is a deep film that reflects on life and death. And one of the things I didn't expect, because I tried not to read too much about it before watching it, was some of the political stuff. Very early on in the movie, you start to make connections and tell stories about 9/11, about how that changed everything in New York. Surveillance cameras started popping up. The military was all over the place. And then you talked a little bit about the NSA and how, much like yourself, a collector of stories, they're collecting our stories. And I thought that was really fascinating. And I was wondering, at what point when you were making this movie did you kind of decide that you were going to not only tell the story of your dog, but kind of venture off into other topics like this one, and what the connection is?
I mean, it wasn't so much the story of my dog, it was the story about how we tell stories.
Yeah.
So there was the story about how my mother would tell stories, how government tells stories,
right.
how, our little town that I lived in and grew up in told stories. This is and that's the story of our moment is stories, because we've just gone through these elections where we listened for 2 years to people tell their stories over and over again, who they are, how things are now, how they got to be this way, what they'll be like in the future. And you just listen to these stories, and you really literally vote for the person whose story you like the best. Does it relate to reality? Not sure, And then, of course, what's getting really confusing now with these stories is that they're getting shorter. They're being tweeted. We're not sure of the source of many of these stories. We're not sure of the truth of many of these stories. We're constantly analyzing stories, and we are not capable of doing that. We're drowning in our own stories. We can no longer process this kind of information. So that's part of why that began to be in the story. It's always been part of my work to see what is the overall story that you're living in.
Mm.
And for us, we've been analyzing through the candidates their so-called story of America. What is the story of this country? Is it, what are the kind of givens that that are always in the background? America is a really generous country, or America is a monolith that will eat everyone alive, or and you do to some extent run your lives based on what you are, how you're dealing with these stories. I think
throughout your career, you've done work that really doesn't seem to be very political in nature, and then there's other times that you have done things that you can see some of your political thinking. Do you have strong opinions about whether art should be inclusive of political ideas or not? I mean, some artists have very strong opinions on that.
Well, I think it often is hard to exclude it from art, but I also think using political ideas as subject matter is also tricky. It gets a little close to propagandic because artists have very sharp tools and can use them. And is that really a great way to convince people of things? I don't know. So I also don't think that politically engaged art is necessarily kind of more relevant than art that is not, or even more politically engaged, because I've seen, for example, an entirely blue painting that gave me a more vivid idea of freedom than a long film that was, or diatribe or something, opera that was supposedly about freedom. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
So it's very easy to get didactic and preachy in that kind of situation. So I'm very wary of it. However, I have done a lot of work that has become in its making extremely political, and does political art change the world? That's such an endless question. Well, it's too big a question, because when I think about that, I think of Dylan.
Yeah.
I think of him writing these songs for losers, and no one had written songs for losers before. It's kind of like romanticizing the loser, and I thought, well, that's a deeply political song. And I was so I think it can be done through in many different ways. For example, just this weekend, yesterday, or when was it? Yesterday? No, Saturday, was in march, and it was like one of the best days of my life.
Oh, wow.
And and it was obviously a deeply political day, but it was also a deeply joyful day. And I just saw how what a political act joy is. You know, it was really strange because there were some agitators in our in our march.
Okay.
They were guys who were in red Trump hats, and they'd come. I don't know who sent them there, or if they just decided to do it on their own. But they seemed a little bit coordinated, so they were like talking to us and going, "What are you doing here?" and we said, "We're marching. What are you doing here? Where are you from?" You know, and that's not a. So the comeback to that can't be, you should get out of here. It's just too disarming. The whole thing was disarming because it was about happiness. It wasn't about accusing other people of things.
Right.
It was so different as a political action that I thought, oh my God, this is how to do it through joy, you know, and positive things. And then another thing I thought was, wait a second, you know, one of the things that people haven't really talked about in terms of this march is that it was organized and produced and executed by women. And on our bus, I mean, this is the best food I've ever had at a demo. You know, first of all, it was like, whoa, really great cooking. And people who are like, we're going to need Prosecco for the bus. So, you know, wait a second, this is a great revolution. And then just people taking care of each other, and a very minimum amount of grandstanding, which in every political movement I've been in since starting in '68 in school when I sat in the Columbia in the library, and I did that. There was the grandstanding going on then, you know.
Yeah,
like,
right.
And of course, it was mostly the guys jockeying for like, this is my revolution, man. You know, can we do this together? We have to have one of you guys be a leader? How about we try it just a little looser for a while, you know? But though they did not want to do that, and neither did anyone on Saturday. And I was beyond happy with what went on. And then on the bus, we had parked in Maryland, and so we had to take a train back to from D.C. to our. So after the rally, we're all in a kind of a metro car.
Okay, right.
And kind of a tram, really. It's not really a subway. Anyway, about 80 people, really crowded. And somebody started to sing. And normally in a situation like this, sing political songs and all sorts of, you know, like,
right.
America the Beautiful, Michael Rowe the Boater. And normally I would just want to kill myself. But it was so wonderful. It was, everybody was singing. Black people, white people, old people, young people, men, women, boys, girls. Well, actually, you know, the people who... And somehow we knew the words to these songs, or we were all doing a pretty good job of faking it. All of us.
Wow.
I couldn't believe what I was in the middle of. But this is what I always wanted, to be in a group of people who have this kind of joy. That's kind of why I do music too. Not kind of. It's why I do it. And so there everybody was singing, and I was just like, whoa, what part of my mind am I digging these words up to? The littlest worm I ever saw in soda. How do I know that? I don't know. I don't know how I know that song. Anyway, so the only people who weren't singing were the little kids.
That's interesting.
They were sitting there kind of like with this traumatized look on their faces. And
what are they doing?
scared. And I realized they'd never seen adults being happy on a train. Ever, or singing. And they'd never been to a demo. And they were they were freaked out. I was like, kids, get used to this. You're going to have to start singing soon. You're going to have to start writing those songs too. So, stand up and sing with them. It's like it was, and obviously, people in the United States haven't done this in a very long time either. Most people just haven't gone to demos.
Yeah.
And so it was just thrilling. I mean, I was part of the Occupy movement. I was part of like a lot of things, but they've all been very short-lived. So we'll see what happens. I'm sorry for the very, very long answer on this.
I'm interested.
I'm really excited by what's going on because the rest of what's going on is just a kind of hysterical trauma that everyone's involved in.
Well, it sounds like you're finding one positive moment out of this, and who knows what it's going to lead to.
Many.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things that you said is that one of the reasons that you play music is because it brings you joy. And, I wanted to ask you, like, in this movie, you show your dog playing music and creating art. And as many people know, you were married to Lou Reed, and the two of you collaborated many times, and there's a fantastic song of his at the end of this movie. And I was wondering, I've had conversations with many people before about when you're in a relationship, either with friends or with your loved one, is it important that you have similar tastes in music, or at least that passion for
no,
music?
I think if you like music, in any kind of music, it helps because it's like. But I think if you're a music lover, it would be a little bit hard for you to be with somebody who didn't like music at all, and who. But I think sometimes different tastes can be fantastic.
Right.
I am not and really wasn't I never have been really a big rock fan.
Right.
I love Lou songs, but when he went off to with the Metallica stuff, I was like. Okay, it's, but I actually also learned to really love that as well. So, I think it opens your mind. It's like, it's the same thing that a music festival does, it's like, it's so wonderful to have them because music is very, very niche in this country, and it's another reason I think that this election has gone this way. Everything is niche. You get into your little world and that's it. You don't even come out. In the New York music world, there are 50 worlds, or maybe 100 worlds, and they don't even coincide that much because you have the opera world, the rock world, the electronic world, the pop world, the folk world, jazz scene, and they all just kind of have their scenes going on. And you could easily spend your whole life and never go into one of the other worlds and consider yourself a music fan in New York.
Yeah.
So, it's thrilling, I think, when, for example, there are festivals that sponsor things that you would not necessarily go to. So when the Lincoln Center does, or when a music festival shows something like from the Peking Opera, people who are, just straight ahead headbangers kind of go, I think I'll check this out because you then you don't have to have the clothes that you would need to go to the opera in New York or the bank account. You can get a ticket for a reasonable amount of money, right, and see a show. I wish there were more festivals like that in New York. Even our festivals are ghettos, Right. It's like we don't have music festivals that are across the board. They're very, very specialized.
Yeah.
And that's one of the effects of there's just so much going on here that's one of the trends is, you just stay in your scene. Your scene is so big.
Yeah.
Cool. And I don't have anything against that, but I think also it would be really, really great if some of those groups said, let's make a really weird festival so that that 12-year-old can go and hear the Peking Opera and goes, God, I love opera.
Yeah.
That's what I love.
That's great, yeah.
Yeah, it would be really, really exciting to, if that happened a little more often.
But you're saying in relationships, at the minimum, it's important for people just to have that mutual love of music and art.
I would never say what's going to work in a relationship. I've seen the least likely things work, and then people who are supposedly incredibly suited to each other. They just can't make it work at all.
Yeah.
There's too well matched or something. I don't know.
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery. That's why love is such a great thing to write about and be in. Love and be loved. It's like a crazy experiment that doesn't make any sense. I loved doing music with Lou, and he helps me enormously on things. Just mostly by saying, why don't you say what you mean in that song? I was like, well, I am. He said, no, you're saying what it's like. And I said, well, it's called metaphor.
Right.
But he said, no, just say it. And when I did that, I just learned a huge amount from it. That was in so many ways especially about lyric writing, and the value of repetition. And I'm really, in other words, choruses. Put a chorus in that thing. I was like,
right.
No, just try it. All right, and he also was the sole reason I finished a lot of projects, because I would just kind of get spaced out and sort of stop working on things. And the thing I will be forever grateful to him, or many other things, is when he was on his Berlin tour and I was having such a problem finishing a record, he canceled a bunch of dates and came back and helped me. Just said, I'm going to sit in the studio here until you finish that. Now, for some couples, this would be like your husband comes in and goes, I'm going to sit here till it's done. You're like, oh, this isn't really a good idea. But in this case, I finished it because of him.
That's great.
Yeah, it was really great.
If you just have a couple more minutes, I just want to ask you about a couple last ideas towards the end of your movie. You tell a story about how when Lola Bell was not doing well at the end, that someone had suggested that Lola Bell be put to sleep. And then someone else said to you that you can't do that death is a process.
Yeah.
That it approaches.
Point of view, and of course I respect everybody's point of view if they decide to do that. I mean, I'm not saying this is what you should do. I'm just saying that was what we did. And when also I didn't really tell the whole story there, which was that when our vet told us this, Lou said, he said, well, she's going to suffer so much that she will, have to live in an oxygen tent the rest of her life. And Lou said, where do we get an oxygen tent? And we got one.
Wow.
She lived in one. And she lived for a couple more years.
Wow.
Nobody knows. So it was just the point of, nobody really knows when things like that are going to happen. So, don't necessarily trust that. And Lou was not about trusting authority, so he was just like, well, let's just see what we can do. So that's what we did. We got her a tent, and she walked in the first afternoon and had a nap, and then the last couple of years she kind of went in and out of it. Whenever she felt like getting a little oxygen, she would go in, but that was it. So that's oh my gosh, I was like.
Well, it's funny. I know you said everyone can have their own opinions, but I've noticed recently in the news that it just seems all over the globe right now. There's a major push to start legalizing euthanasia, and I mean I don't know what the answer is, but somehow your story and your movie just made me think about it a little bit differently.
Yeah. I'm for everybody taking the responsibility for their own situation and not trying to.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Say what anyone should do,
Yeah.
but I do think that life is really precious, and if you can hang on to it, and if someone can help you do that in a way that is meaningful, it's a great thing to do. So sometimes people feel that they're in the way and they're a burden, and so they don't want to do that, and that makes me so sad. That they would just do that to get out of someone's way. So it depends on the motivation. in terms of how I feel about it. I mean, but it doesn't matter how I feel about it. It depends on how that person feels about it.
There's a...
And some people, it's just, enough is enough. They've had enough life, and they're... And I respect everybody's thing except somebody who feels a little bit forced into killing themselves because they're a burden. And that, I think we need to really look at that one, because we need to help people not feel like we get one life, one. And, I think we should try to help each other get through it as well as we can. Not just kind of kick someone out because you're taking up too much air.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. One person who you quote in the film whose life ended too shortly was David Foster Wallace.
Yeah.
And you have a quote in there about how every love story is a ghost story. And you have a whole thing in the movie about ghosts and seeing ghosts. And I was wondering, what is generally your belief about, like, what happens when people die?
Well, I'm in the Bob Thurman school of his teaching, which I listen to constantly through this process of Lou dying, and he has a beautiful 5 CD set called "In the Between," Liberation, the story of the Book of the Dead, Tibetan Book of the Dead, and that is an incredible collection of CDs that I would recommend to anyone who is trying to figure out what happens after death. First line, the first thing I want to say is, there are no dead people. And he goes on from there. So I'm going to leave you with that to just see if people want to check that one out. It's incredible.
That's really interesting. Well, one last question, Laurie. At the end of the film, Lou sings a song, Turn Time Around.
Yeah, Turning Time Around.
Yeah, Turning Time Around. That's what love is. And it plays over the credits, and it's really just a perfect ending to this movie.
Yeah.
What is meant by that expression?
Everything. Memory, hope, the present, how the present affects the past, how the greatest schools of philosophy. That is a song that can take your lifetime to figure out.
Well, it's a beautiful song, and I want to congratulate you. This is a very special movie that deals with a lot of important themes and ideas, and it's a very personal story that you share, and I want to thank you for doing it.
Oh, you're very welcome, and it's been fun talking with you.
Okay, thank you very much, Laurie.
Okay, take care.
Take it easy.
Bye-bye.